So those of you who may be slightly anticipating and anxious to hear whatever the topic is, discourse, is it? Racial discourse? That will come with problem and problematic or whatever. That will come when Dr. Karenga comes. Can we have a warm greeting from my beloved sister and boss?
Thank you very much, Shashi. My presentation this evening is dedicated to Dr. Charlotte Shashi Lawrence McIntyre. Shashi has been trying to hold AHSA together. If you can't hear me, raise your hand. Shashi has been trying to hold AHSA together for quite some years now, and those of us in AHSA are very grateful to her for her work and her commitment. The topic of this President's Forum is the poverty of race transcendent discourse, the paradigm and problematic. Dr. Karenga will talk to you about that. I am not. I want to talk to you about the education of our children in public schools. And I want to talk to use as my case-specific Chicago. Now, I know that many of you do not come from Chicago and probably are not aware of what is going on in Chicago. So I'm going to first give you just a little brief history of it, won't be long, and then I want to talk to you about what's going on. Chicago has been trying to take back the schools from the African-American majority. 60% of the students in the Chicago public schools are African-American, 30% are Hispanic, and 10% are white. The Chicago majority has been trying to take the schools back from the African-American majority, and I want that to be a contradiction in your mind. That's why I'm saying it that way. And it's been 3 phases to it. Phase 1 was to get rid of Ruth Love and anybody else who was interested in educating our children. Now, I mean by that, teaching them how to read, write, and do mathematics. The second phase was to take the governance of the system and put it in the hands of the people so that adults' needs would be taken care of, and whether or not they met the needs of the children was secondary, and still is. The third phase, and in that phase, this whole restructuring did 3 very important things. It eliminated positions, and when you eliminate the position, you eliminate the person in the position, and took away the whole African-American middle management of the school system and gave it to other groups. But they left the top people, the superintendent and the deputy superintendent and the assistant superintendents and the chief financial officer, African American, which gives you the illusion that you're still handling it. Once these positions were eliminated, the people in them had to go or be demoted. And so a whole group of African Americans with a lot of experience about how you educate African American children, people committed to that, left the school system. Phase 3 is about to commence, and that is the privatization of public schooling. And Benno Schmidt was here last week, my friends, my brothers and sisters, talking to us about Edison Corporation, which intends to take over the public schools and run them for profit. Now, brothers and sisters, if you just know this much about capitalism, you know that when your goal is to make a profit, everything else is secondary. Which means that the education of our children will be secondary to making money. Now, there are a lot of brothers and sisters that say, well, maybe we ought to go for this and take over these schools and run them ourselves. Well, yeah, maybe we ought to do that. We ought to do that. But do we have enough money to fight Whittle? Do we have enough capital to run most of these schools where our children are? Or will we just take 2 or 3 of them and then 404 of them will go to Xerox, IBM, Paramount Pictures? We need to think about this, and we need to plan for it. Because if we are going to go for privatization, sisters and brothers, we need to start saving some capital, quit building churches and build schools, put our money where our mouth is, and do it. But if we're just going to sit around and talk about it, let me tell you, Edison's going to grab it and go. They need to think about this. The privatization of public schools raises several questions around the protection of access, participation, and successful outcomes in education for minorities. Now, the book that all the white people are reading about this, brothers and sisters, is a book called Public Education and Autopsy by Myron Lieberman. And this is what he says in that book. He says that civil rights refer to civil capacity to contract, to own property, to make wills, to give evidence, and to sue and be sued. Now, this is big news to me, because I always thought that civil was derived from civis feminine, which is the Latin word meaning citizen, and that citizen rights were embodied in the Bill of Rights, that's 1 through 10, amendments to the U.S. Constitution 1 through 10, and Amendment 14. And any of you know who that much about the African American struggle for education in this country knows that our entire struggle has been around the 14th Amendment. Now, Amendment 14 says, 1, a citizen is anyone who is born in the United States or naturalized therein. No state shall abridge citizenship rights without due process, and every citizen should have equal protection of the law. Now, if these are not citizen rights or civil rights, then I just don't know what I'm talking about. Furthermore, this man says in his book, listen to this, as used here, the term civil rights does not include any financial entitlements, brothers and sisters, or protection against all private expressions of prejudice. It does, however, include the right not to be subject to discrimination by government. Do you understand what I said? I said that a private school can discriminate against you if they want to. After all, it's private. Do you get the message? Thank you. So since private schools would be entitled to private expressions of prejudice, where does this leave groups which are discriminated against, like you know who? This is what this man also says in his book. Now, this is the book that the people are reading who are going for privatization. They sent me a copy. Lieberman says that private schools have the right to exclude students they do not want, while public schools enjoy free tuition. So it's a quid pro quo. He argues that public schools have the advantage because people can go to them free. He is willing, however, to take this advantage away from the public schools, but unwilling to disturb the private schools' advantage. In other words, we're going to have private schools, and they're going to charge, or we're going to give vouchers so everybody has to pay the school, right? So the free tuition is gone because everybody will be paying. But private schools can still exclude. Something's wrong with that, brothers and sisters. Now, in this new system of 3-tiered schools, that's those that are running for profit, those that are running for not-for-profit, like parochial schools and Catholic schools, and the public schools, what advantage would the public schools enjoy to offset the unfair advantage then held by private schools? And it would be different, brothers and sisters, if we were all together on this, But can't you see these middle-class Negroes in their Cadillacs driving off to these private schools trying to get in there and run away from the rest of y'all? We're not even together on it. We're not even together on it. I got brothers and sisters in schools that are prejudiced against their children, paying big bucks for them to go there every day. And if I give you their names, you know them. Lieberman states, the following, this is what he says about bilingual education. He says, fundamentally, bilingual education is based on ethnic politics. Hispanic political leaders view bilingual education as a source of patronage and jobs for their constituents. Lip service is paid to integration and proficiency in English. Failure to achieve these objectives is allegedly due to failure to fund bilingual education adequately. In economic terms, bilingual education is a prime example of the subordination of consumer to producer interests. Now, if that's what they got to say about bilingual education, where these kids speak Spanish, what do you think they're going to say about Afrocentric education? Now, this comment comes from one who advocates the privatization of education for minority children, so their civil rights can be abrogated. Moreover, no notion of the advantages of knowing two languages exists here. In almost all the other industrial nations of the world, it's good to know more than one language, but not here. Other recommendations made by this man to make a profit are these. Let students leave school at 14. How you like that? Private schools should not be required to accept all children. Ethnic disparities should not be considered prima facie evidence that discrimination exists. Private schools can discriminate legally. Groups that wish to transmit their own heritage should be required to pay for it.
Now.
Are you listening? More disturbing is his willingness to accept the thesis that African Americans are genetically inferior as valid. And that's the reason he states that schools ought to be able to exclude. Find this on page 356 of this book, especially when some of your friends send it to you to read, to elicit your support as a middle-class Negro for a private school. On page 210, he says, personally, I do not agree that public policies that have a disparate impact on blacks are necessarily racist. When does one know when they are? What are the criteria for determination? What difference does it make if private schools are exempt and able to discriminate on this basis anyway? The Supreme Court, in its decision in Plessy versus Ferguson, deciding that segregation, if equal, only connotated the inferiority of the Negro in the mind of the Negro, reveals the fallacy behind these ideas. This man notes that multicultural education, race problems, educating the minorities have destroyed public education. He boldly says in a whole chapter that the reason we're in the mess today is because of y'all. You raised such a ruckus about equity. You raised so much cane about being segregated. You fussed and stormed so much about being educated, you made the white people angry with the public schools. And so now it's your fault that they disappeared. This man advises all of these white people to whom he serves as a high-priced consultant. He advises them to abolish school boards or have them appointed by mayors. Would you like Dickie do that for you? Down with democratic elections. Put people in jail if they cheat on tests. Now listen, the supply, oh hey, you all better wake up. Because this is what is in store for you. This is what this reform was getting to. With your cooperation. With your cooperation. The supply and demand paradigm of capitalism will be working in the market plan of private for-profit schools. The better the schools, the scarcer and more expensive they will become, putting them out of the reach of the working poor. And this will create a system of premier schools and pauper schools, relegating once again our people to an inferior universe of education, just as it was done in the first Jim Crow. Oh, brothers and sisters, can't you see this cycle coming around again? We went through the first Reconstruction and the first Jim Crow, then the second Reconstruction. This is the second Jim Crow. Wake up! The things that are happening to us now happened once before. We're going through this again. Where we are being, the first Reconstruction, the big promises of the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment were given to us, and we created the public school system in the South according to Du Bois and Black Reconstruction, the founding of the public schools, and our people rushed into the schools to get educated, to read, write, and do mathematics, and then what happened? They cut them off. And we went into Jim Crow and separation, separate but equal, and they were never equal. That's what's happening to us now. That's what's going to happen through this, unless we intervene and do something different. Now, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I've been talking about this before you for so long. I hate to come back with it again. I find myself a one-note Pollyanna, talking about this over and over. New audiences, to be sure, same message. All children can learn, but this pervasive belief that somehow poverty prevents you from learning is just something I cannot understand. I cannot understand it. I cannot understand it. How African American people, who poor as they can believe that poverty keeps you from reading. How many of you were poor when you were little? Okay, same people who raised your hand, same people, how many of you can read? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Did you see Oprah the other morning? Did you see her? Where these African-American teachers were up there talking about these kids like they were some kind of dogs, inhuman animals that you have to cuss at and beat in order to get them to understand what's going to happen. Everybody jumped on the mother who was defending her kid. I mean, you know, like, it was really crazy. It was really crazy. Walk around and talk to people and find out how they feel about our children in school. They don't talk about them like they're people. They don't talk about them like they're students. They don't talk about them like they can learn, like they're not normal people who deserve love and care and affection and a good teacher. Let me tell you that a child whose mother is a junkie, let me tell you, let me tell you, brothers and sisters, a child whose mother is a junkie and whose father is in prison has as much right to learn how to read as my child does. I have spent the last 15 years of my life studying high-achieving, predominantly African-American schools. My research is clear that proper teaching in a way which helps children to overcome the exigencies of poverty, crime, violence, disrupted families, and disorganized communities produces high achievement. For 10 years now, at these conferences, I have given you the evidence, the addresses and telephone numbers of these schools. I even brought a video. Asa Hilliard and I served as co-chairpersons to AIT, and we now have videos of these schools that we can show you. These schools got principals in them. They have addresses and telephone numbers. You folks who live in Chicago could jump on the bus and go to Pittsburgh. Those of you who live in Atlanta in the South can go to Dallas. These schools are real, and in these schools our children are learning. Not at some little old penny ante level, like people say, oh, they grew 2 months in 30 months. No, no. The Van Elementary School in the Pittsburgh public school system is 98% black. The children live in Bedford Housing Authority, which is the largest public housing in Pittsburgh. Only 19% of these children live with their mother and father. It is a high crime area, drug infested. It's in Ward 5, District 1, the highest crime area in Pittsburgh. And this school was the highest achieving of the 51 elementary schools in the Pittsburgh public school system in 1990 in mathematics. 90% of these children scored at or above the national norm on the California Achievement Test in mathematics. Since that time, Madison School, down the road and around the corner, where the children come from, the second largest public housing in Pittsburgh, was the highest achieving in reading and mathematics for 2 years in a row. Now, there are 51 elementary schools in the Pittsburgh public school system, brothers and sisters, and they still have 5 all-white schools. So don't sell that stuff to me. I don't want to hear it. This is the problem. The problem is getting our people. Let's don't worry about white people right now.
All right.
Getting our people to believe that our children can learn. Getting our people to believe that they should learn. That's the first thing. And then getting them to do it. That's the next thing. The Chicago Reform Law of 1988, the reform is to take the school system back to the white majority. That's what it's supposed to do. And it's for who? Adults who need jobs, because IBM and Xerox are firing them, and they have to have some place to go. That's what all these new laws about. No, you don't have to be certified now. Governor Edgar has one coming up. New Jersey has one. That where now you don't need to have a lot of psychology courses or methodology courses or courses, gen ed. I mean, you could be a plumber, you know, a fired plumber from someplace, and come in and teach our kids, because of course anybody can teach our kids, right? Because they stupid anyhow. Huh? Listen to that. It's very careful you to listen to what's being talked about, because if you're going to have a position on it, we need to develop one. Presently, I am working with 12 schools on the implementation of 10 routines which have proved effective in the schools I have studied. Some of these schools are going to be successful. Others will not. Governance, no matter who does it, brothers and sisters, is not the answer alone. Innovation will not solve this problem alone. Neither will additional resources solve this problem alone. Small class size won't solve this problem, or any other newfangled fad. What has to change, brothers and sisters, is what goes on in the classroom, what goes on between the teacher and the student over the medium. Let me just give you one little example, and you will understand this. In a high-achieving school, when the student doesn't get it, the first thing the teacher looks at is the medium. That's what he or she is teaching and what he or she is using to teach it. The question the teacher asks in the high-achieving school is, does it fit? Is it the kind of thing I should use? Am I doing the right thing? In a low-achieving school where our children are concentrated and can't read, the first thing the teacher looks at is the student. Get the psychiatrist. Get the assistant principal. Get him out of here. Do something to him. There is a stark difference between these two schools. In a high-achieving schools, the teachers teach what the children need to know, not what's in the cotton-picking book. These books weren't written by people who know your children. You cannot get a textbook. You can get this one. This is Sharshi's book called Criminalizing the Race. You cannot get a book and the book is going to tell you what to teach. You have to do an assessment of what your children know, and then what is it they need to know in order to be a successful student in that subject and prepare for the next level. That's what you have to teach. I find teachers in low-achieving school, here it is, October the 15th, and they still reviewing addition and subtraction, and everybody in the class can do it. That's a waste of their time. Walk around. Watch how many teachers you see sitting on a seat. You can't teach school that way, not to African-American children. You got to walk and talk. You got to walk around, show them how to do things, communicate with them, give immediate feedback. You can't sit on your can and grade papers and teach. That's not the way you do it. When you see a lot of writing going on in classes, that is not teaching, brothers and sisters. That's control. You control the kid when you got him writing. I went in a classroom, the kid had written the spelling words. He was working on spelling words. No, it was a girl. She was working on spelling words. And this is what happened. She had written her spelling word orphan, O-R-P-H-A-N. Okay, she had written it about 10 times. So I said to her, I said, oh, that's nice, honey. I said, you sure can write good. I said, what does orphan mean? She said, we ain't got to that yet. Now, anytime you have somebody write a word 10 times, they don't even know what it is. That's not teaching, ladies and gentlemen. That's what you call control. So beware when you walk through these classrooms. See, first, look for the teachers. Teacher sitting on his or her can, got a problem. Secondly, the teacher's always grading papers, got a problem. That means too much writing's going on in there, right? And not enough teaching. Teaching is not synonymous with writing or reading. Teaching is a whole different act where you communicate with another human being over a medium to find out, do they understand a skill or a concept? And it's that you give to them, they give to you. In a teaching-learning situation, the teacher is as much as a student as a student, because you are constantly learning what it is about your student that you need to know so that you can communicate with your student better in order to do what? Learn the lesson. Too many, and you can teach, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, you can teach anybody anything that you know. Now, you can't teach people what you don't know. But you can teach anybody anything that you know, any age, blind, cripple, or crazy. If you know it, you can teach it to anybody, anytime, any age. It's just another prerequisite you have to have. You have to know it, and you have to understand how your learner processes information and applies it to use. You have to know that. If you got those two things together, you can teach anybody anything. Ladies and gentlemen, I will be 67 years old, December the 17th, 1927. I started teaching when I was 19 years old in Chicago Public Schools. I have never, ever had a student I could not teach how to read. Never. Someone called me the other day and told me that Ira Murchison had died. I remember when Ira Murchison was in 8th grade at the John D. Shoup School, 1460 West 112th Street, and he couldn't read, and he was very disturbed about that. And he told me one day, he said, I'm going to be the world's greatest runner. He said, but there's one thing I don't know how to do. I can't read well. I said, do you want to learn how to read? He said, yes. He said, now I'm going to teach you. And he learned how to read. In 1 year, he learned how to read. It should not take us 180 days to teach anybody anything, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. You can teach a dumb dog a trick in 90 days. A human being is a wonderful person. A human being has enormous intelligence. All human beings are gifted in this way. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether they're slow learners or moderate learners or fast learners. You can teach a person who's a slow learner to be a fast learner, just like you can teach a slow reader to be a speed reader. There's no secret about it. All you need is a teacher who knows it herself or himself and understands how the learner processes information. Teachers do not spend enough time doing either one of those things. We don't spend enough time. I am amazed at the number of my students at DePaul planning to be teachers who do not read.
Rough.
You can't learn everything you need to know from television. I mean, they haven't put all the information you need on video yet. I mean, they're getting there, CD-ROMs are trying. But it's not there yet. If we want children to be readers, we have to be readers. At least teachers have to be readers. Those are some of the things that I'm noticing happening. I want to bring to your attention today, I spend almost all my time in schools. This is the first time in my life I have worked at an institution where I did not get penalized for helping the poor. And oddly enough, it's a Catholic urban white university. The whole time I was in the Chicago Public Schools, I had to fight to help poor people. I mean fight. And eventually had to leave my job because it was such a struggle. And I was determined I was not going to work for James Moffett, so I left. And Manford Bird wouldn't deliver me, so I had to go. But I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, that we know everything that we need to know in order to teach the children that we have and love. One last note on Benno Schmidt. Does everybody know who Benno Schmidt is now? No. Okay, Benno Schmidt was the president of Yale University, and he quit to be the president of the Edison Corporation. The Edison Corporation is owned by Whittle, which owns Communication One, where they're teaching your kids with the commercials on television. Y'all know this? Hey, you better wake up, brothers and sisters. You gotta know this. You have to know this. Because these are the people going to take over the public schools. How many of you planning to teach or are teaching? You going to continue? Are you going to continue? All right, you got to understand what's happening. Okay, everybody know who Benno Schmidt is now? All right. He has hired Deborah McGriff, African-American, former superintendent of Detroit, as his right-hand girl, lady, woman, whatever, help, assistance, whatever. And she is now at a six-figure salary, I understand. And she is now recruiting African Americans to be principals of these schools. You will not be fighting Benno. Are you hearing me? Thank you. This is what he said in his speech here last week. He says, teachers and principals must want to educate these children and committed to doing whatever is necessary to make this happen. He said, an innovative school would look like this. There would be more time, 210 days at 12 hours a day. Information technology would be pervasive. Every student and teacher would have a computer at school and at home. The curriculum would be clear, integrated, reinforced vertically and horizontally, enriched and interesting, with lots of music and art, physical fitness, health and play, and more unstructured time. Now listen, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, if you have our children coming from disrupted families, disorganized communities, where their lives are unstructured most of the time, if you want to teach these children to be students, you have to structure the time in school so they can learn it. Now, if you're satisfied with this, that's one thing. I'm clearly not, as you can tell. But if you're satisfied with reading these reports in the Chicago Tribune about all these schools that are predominantly African American, what can't nobody read, if that pleases you, then forget everything I said. If it's all right with you, because they're going to give you what you want. They're going to give you what you want in order to get your vote on this private school thing. If it's all right with you that they give you everything you ask for in an Afrocentric school, if that's okay with you, and the kids are, 52% of them are in the bottom quarter and can't read Africa, if that's okay with you, then fine, don't pay attention to me. But remember, our children have to have both, not one or the other, no trade-offs. They have to have both, not one or the other, no trade-offs. So don't fall for that okie doke, because they're ready to do that. You see, because if you can't read, and you can't write, and you can't compute, you're not going to have a job in the 21st century. It's going to be to prison for you. And remember, prison building is the biggest growth industry, especially in Illinois. We got 4 on there going up. And remember, you can't even help yourself with a prison. They build it in the white rural section of Illinois where the jobs all go to the people living out there and where they get the construction jobs. So you get to build these things you put you in, not work in them. It's not a profit for us, needless to say, about our children. Let me end with a mention about equity, because this is what this struggle's been about. We're getting equity confused with equality, ladies and gentlemen. They're not the same thing. Look, we may not all need the same thing. We may not all need the same money spent on us. A kid whose mother's a junkie, whose father's in prison, may need more than my kid. Treating them equal would not be fair. That's what equity is all about. Equity is concerned with justice, with what is fair, not equality. Equality is concerned with what is the same. Now, there are some things we want equality in. We certainly want the same dollars spent on our children as spent on anybody else. Equal dollars. We definitely want that. No more of this unequal stuff, all right? We also want our children to achieve as well as any other group on the standardized achievement test, because they can do it, ladies and gentlemen. You have been brainwashed into believing that our children cannot do this. Our children can do this. They just have to be taught what they need to know in order to do it. All of you passed tests. You had to. You couldn't be here if you didn't. You have to, there are prerequisites to doing it, and that's what our children have to know. So let's don't get equity confused with equality, because if you don't know what they're talking about, you will get tricked. And the trade-offs you will agree to will come back and haunt you. Remember, if it's not fair, don't buy it. That's why Lonnie Guinier was shut up, because she was talking about what is fair, not what is equal, what is fair. And the very thing that Lonnie Guinier was talking about for us, these white people are going to be selling you in South Africa. You have to be careful about what you agree to. You have to understand what the whole game is about. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, what is up for grabs now is public schooling. That's what's up for grabs, public schooling. White America is giving up on democracy. Oh yeah, it's giving up. That's what Lonnie is talking about. Read her book, The Tyranny of the Majority. That's what Lonnie Guinier is telling you. White America is giving up on democracy because there's too many of y'all wanting it. And so, since whiteness is property, as Cheryl Harris said in the Harvard Law Review, June 1993, since whiteness is property, it confers undeserved benefits and privileges just from being born, which you nor I can take back unless we change the rules. Now, we may not have the votes to change the rules, but brothers and sisters, we do have the power.